They thought she was just another gray-haired nobody. They were wrong. The automatic doors at the Central Valley VA Center hissed open, doddering like they'd been installed in another century closer in spirit, perhaps, to the woman who now stepped through them. At first glance, she looked every bit the retiree on a routine appointment. Plain navy windbreaker zipped to mid-chest, old jeans faded at the knees, black work boots buffed more by years than polish. A single silver braid lay neatly down her back. It swung like a metronome, steady and unbothered, even as her right knee favored memory over comfort and added a barely perceptible hitch to her stride. She carried no purse, just a square leather wallet and a canvas document folder smudged with initials long past legible. For most people milling around the reception orderly clerks in khakis, young aides balancing cardboard trays of burnt coffee, that first impression was all they needed. A harmless older lady, someone's grandmother. A soul to usher politely toward the sign-in kiosk before returning to texts and vending machine gossip. But Private Dylan Brooks was bored, and boredom invites small cruelties. He leaned forward from behind the plexiglass screening station, dusted donut sugar from his sleeve, and flashed a sideways grin at his partner, PFC Casey Reed. "Morning, ma'am," he drawled, letting the final vowel hang half a beat too long just enough for Reed to smirk without trying to hide it. The woman her driver's license once named her Ruth Barrett, though few in uniform still remembered placed an ID card on the counter. It wasn't plastic, it felt heavier, almost waxy. The laminate yellowed the way old photographs tint at the edges. In its corner glimmered a QR strip so antiquated Reed actually laughed. "Ma'am," Reed said, lifting the card gingerly between thumb and forefinger, "this thing looks like it expired before cable television got color." Brooks whistled a theatrical note. "Smithsonian's on the other side of the country, but if you donate this relic, they might send you a tote bag." Ruth didn't flinch. She had spent decades in places where flinching cost dearly, so she simply waited, eyes level, lips shut, hands resting on the counter as though patience were oxygen, and these two boys had none to spare. Reed, emboldened, flipped the card to catch the fluorescent light, then held it beside Ruth's face. The photo there could have been her granddaughter's, cropped hair, steely stare, a jawline unused to smiling. "I'm serious," Reed went on, voice rising so desk clerks 3 rows back could hear. "Is that even laminate? Or like papyrus?" Someone snickered near the outbound elevator, a quick, nervous sound. Most people know better than to laugh, but know better often wilts in the humidity of groupthink. Brooks tapped a finger on the scanner plate. "Let's see if it even registers." He winked at Reed, the universal young, soldier wink that says, "Watch me nail this punchline." Ruth remained still, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, the way an old boxer rests between rounds present, contained, not yet called upon. Brooks gave the card a flamboyant wave under the reader. A red diode blinked twice. Unrecognized format. "Ha! Called it!" he crowed. He slid the card back toward her, as though returning a losing lottery ticket. "You'll need something from this century, ma'am." Reed sipped lukewarm coffee that smelled of cardboard more than beans. Maybe it's one of those conspiracy tags from the Cold War Operation Blue Hair or whatever. He caught sight of a nursing student passing by and rolled his eyes theatrically. She rewarded him with an awkward, uncertain grin. In the world Ruth once occupied, sarcasm was the last refuge of men untested by consequence. She inhaled, the breath slow enough that her sternum barely moved, and spoke her first words since entering. "Could you scan it again? Slowly, please." Brooks lifted an eyebrow. The request was polite, undemanding, almost frail, exactly the sort of tone that lets a bored 20-something feel generous while still in control. "Sure thing," he said. "Third time's the charm, right?" He leaned on the counter, drew the card beneath the reader with a lazy swoop, and for good measure muttered, "Abracadabra." The scanner's red light flicked once, then paused. A mechanical click too deep for desk hardware echoed up from somewhere behind the wall, like a volt pin sliding. Reed frowned, but before he could comment, the screen adjacent to the reader went black then, grey then, flooded with gold, blooming outward from a single point until it resolved into a circle. Inside that circle, a black triangle pointed downward, turning degrees so steadily it seemed to bore through the glass. Time stretched thin, elastic. Conversations at distant cubicles petered out. Even the tinny radio playing George Strait wound to silence, though no one had touched the dial. Brooks's forearm, still resting across the counter, felt suddenly heavy. On the screen, crimson letters crystallized beneath the turning emblem. Flag protocol. Alpha, 1 red zone. Identity confirmed. The words glowed as though backlit by something hotter than pixels. Reed's coffee cup hovered halfway to his mouth. A single bead of stale brew slid over the rim, unnoticed. Behind them, a security camera pivoted with an audible servo whine, centering on the reader station. Overhead, a line of amber lights embedded in the ceiling stuttered to life, tracing a path toward the east corridor like emergency breadcrumbs. Someone, the nursing student, maybe gasped at the sudden shift, and for the first time Ruth allowed herself the smallest tilt of her head, just enough to acknowledge the screen. Brooks swallowed. It sounded loud in the sudden hush. "System glitch?" he whispered, unconvincing even to himself. The scanner emitted a second tone lower, metallic, final. Then every automatic door in the lobby locked with a synchronized thud, and a voice over the PA, flat yet urgent, said, "Security command to checkpoint 1, station lockdown. Personnel, step away from the terminal." Reed's pupils darted from the emblem to Ruth, back to Brooks. The mockery slid from his expression like rain off wax paper, replaced by something rawer, recognition that whatever game he'd been playing, the rules had never belonged to him. Ruth reclaimed her ID from the frozen hand in front of her. "Looks," she said, voice calm as sunrise, "like the card works after all." The lobby had transformed. A minute ago it was all styrofoam coffee, idle chatter, and indifferent glances. Now, it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. No one dared to speak, not the receptionists, not the nurses, not the 2 men who just mocked a woman they barely understood. Private Brooks stumbled back a step, as if proximity to Ruth might somehow mark him. His eyes darted toward the locked glass doors, as though imagining escape. PFC Reed? He'd stopped blinking. The coffee cup trembled slightly in his grasp, the way a rookie might shake before their first live round. Behind the main desk, the security console flickered again. The golden triangle on screen was spinning faster now, but with eerie precision, not chaos. It didn't stutter like a glitch, it moved with intent. The red text shifted again. Authorization confirmed. Echo zone access active. Command notified, full courtesy protocol required. Reed finally found his voice, though it came out a whisper. "Echo zone? What the hell is Echo zone?" No answer came, but across the lobby, a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" hissed open. Out stepped a man in a black tactical vest with VA security stitched across the chest in block letters. He had a clipboard in one hand, a radio crackling in the other, and the unmistakable air of someone who believed procedure was sacred. Sergeant First Class Delaney. He walked with the slow, measured steps of someone doing quick math in his head, calculating threat levels, fallout, and maybe his own job security. "What's going on here?" he barked, eyes sweeping the room. "Why is Protocol Alpha triggering at a VA scanner?" Brooks straightened as if his spine had suddenly found purpose. "Sershesh handed us this ID card. Looked fake. Old. We just scanned it to prove it wouldn't work." Delaney snatched the ID from his outstretched hand and took one glance, his lips pressed into a line. "You scanned this?" he asked, voice low now, "with no override authorization." "Yes, sir," Brooks said. "We didn't think." "That," Delaney said, cutting him off, "is exactly the problem." He turned to Ruth. She hadn't moved an inch since the terminal lit up, still and calm as a stone in a stream. It was the kind of presence you didn't question, it questioned you. "Ma'am," Delaney said slowly, each syllable deliberate, "I need to verify your identity through official channels. I hope you understand." Ruth met his gaze with a small nod. "It's already been verified," she said. Delaney blinked. He looked again at the scanner, then at the ID, then at the gold emblem still pulsing on the terminal like a heartbeat. His lips moved silently, reading the words again. Then the intercom buzzed to life with a voice no one in the room recognized. "Alpha level identity confirmed. Interim command mobilizing. Do not detain. Repeat, do not detain." That was the moment everything changed. Reed's coffee cup hit the desk with a thud. Brooks backed all the way against the wall, his expression drained of color. Even Delaney, seasoned, disciplined, by-the-book Delaney, looked like he'd just been handed a live grenade without the pin. The doors at the far end of the lobby opened again. This time, 2 military police officers in full uniform stepped through. Not base security, not contract guards, real MPs, a man and a woman. Their gear was streamlined, precise, and their eyes scanned the room with the kind of calm usually reserved for defusing bombs. When they saw the symbol on the locked terminal, they stiffened just slightly, then both turned in perfect sync toward Ruth. The male MP stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said with quiet authority, "we're here to escort you to interim command verification. You'll be treated under full courtesy protocol. If you'd follow us, please." It wasn't a request, but it also wasn't an order. It was respect. Ruth nodded once and stepped forward. The MPs didn't walk ahead of her or behind, they flanked her, shoulder to shoulder, like old friends in a formation they'd used before. No one tried to stop her. No one dared. As she passed the scanner station, she paused just briefly. Reed looked up at her like he'd seen a ghost in combat boots. "Ma'am," he started, but nothing else came out. Ruth's expression didn't change, but she spoke with the same calm clarity she'd carried from the moment she walked through the doors. "Don't speak unless you mean it," she said gently. "That's lesson 1. Then she was gone, moving down the corridor like a current shifting through stone, still steady, still silent, still undefeated. Brooks leaned over and whispered to Reed, "Dude, we just mocked someone who probably built the building we're standing in." Reed didn't answer. He was too busy trying to remember every word he'd said, wishing he could take each one back before they echoed any further up the chain of command. From the far corner of the lobby, a wall-mounted monitor blinked off. Facility maps and lunch announcements faded into black. Then, emergency lighting kicked in. Subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. Because this wasn't just a system error. This was something nobody wanted to admit could still exist. And Ruth Barrett? She didn't need to prove anything. The system had already done it for her. Upstairs in the administrative wing, people were still pretending nothing strange had happened. Keyboards clicked, phones rang, a printer hummed out a requisition form no one had asked for. But beneath it all, a tension buzzed in the walls like the prelude to a thunderstorm. In a glass-walled conference room, Ruth Barrett sat alone. She wasn't pacing, wasn't checking a watch, wasn't fiddling with a pen or glancing at her phone. She simply sat, hands folded neatly on the table, posture straight, presence unwavering. The gold emblem from the scanner downstairs now glowed softly on a tablet at the far end of the table, still rotating with that strange living precision. No one knew how to turn it off. No one dared to try. Outside the room, 4 VA staffers clustered near a water cooler. They weren't even pretending to work anymore. A few feet down the hall, a young officer peeked around the corner, caught sight of Ruth inside the room and immediately retreated, whispering something urgent into his radio. Then the stairwell door slammed open. Not just open took control of the space. A woman strode through like she owned not just the floor, but the air inside it. Her hair was regulation grey, clipped short, not a strand out of place. Flight jacket, silver oak leaves, no entourage, just rank, purpose, and presence. Colonel Tessa McBride. "Who triggered Flag Protocol Alpha 1? She demanded, her voice sharp enough to slice through reinforced glass. "And why the hell wasn't I notified the moment it lit up?" No one answered. Nobody moved. The clerk by the elevator froze mid-step. The printer jammed. Even the screensaver on the far wall paused like it didn't want to interrupt. McBride didn't wait for permission. She walked directly into the conference room, looked Ruth straight in the eyes, and everything changed. "Miss Barrett," she said, with a nod that wasn't quite formality, but wasn't casual either. Ruth inclined her head, calm as always. "Colonel, you still know how to make an entrance." "I prefer to think of it as efficiency," McBride said, "especially when people forget what matters." For the first time, a flicker of a smile crossed Ruth's lips, then, dry and vanishing before it fully formed. She didn't need charm. She had something better, memory. McBride turned toward the hallway, where a group of staffers had gathered like tourists at a crime scene. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of someone who'd been obeyed in war zones. "Let me make this clear," she said. "What you are seeing is not a glitch. It is not a spoofed credential, a prank, or a clerical error. That," she gestured toward the emblem on the tablet, "is something most of you were never cleared to know even existed." She reached into her jacket and withdrew a black folder bordered in red, the kind of folder that lived in safes behind concrete, not in sunlight. She opened it to a page nearly drowned in black redaction, sparse except for the top. Operation Echo 0. Authorization level above top secret. And there, it was the same gold triangle. The the one still glowing beside Ruth, like a silent witness. McBride read from the margin, her voice steady. 6 individuals in the United States Armed Forces were ever given this clearance. 4 are dead. 1 is missing and presumed dead. She looked back at Ruth. And the 6th is sitting right here. The silence that followed was different now. Not tense, not awkward. It was reverent. From the back of the hallway, 2 familiar faces had appeared, Brooks and Reed, somehow having followed the commotion upstairs, though now clearly regretting it. McBride's eyes locked onto them. Her tone turned to steel. "And you," she said, mocked her ID card. Brooks opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Reed shifted his weight and stared at the floor like he could vanish through it. McBride folded the folder closed with a snap. Effective immediately, Private Brooks and PFC Reed are reassigned to custodial duty. Oh, 600. Report to the maintenance supervisor and begin remedial protocol training starting with respect. Neither man dared argue. Then McBride turned again to Ruth. "You didn't have to use that clearance," she said. "You knew it would set off everything." "I knew," Ruth replied quietly, "but sometimes the world needs reminding." The MPs had returned, now flanking the door. The hallway behind them had parted like water. McBride nodded once, more respectful this time. "Walk with me?" Ruth stood. She didn't gloat, didn't look at Brooks or Reed, didn't say a word. She simply walked, and the building adjusted around her. As they passed portraits of facility, commanders and awards, no one read anymore. Even the frames seemed to straighten. One photo near the end of the hall caught Ruth's eye. "You remember Hammond?" McBride asked. The man in the frame had silver hair, kind eyes. "Listened more than he spoke," Ruth said. "Good officer. He's the one who fought to keep your access active, said some clearances should never expire. He was right." They walked on in silence. No drama, no need to explain. Because by now, everyone in the building knew. This wasn't just a retired woman. She was the reason some systems still worked. And the worst mistake anyone could make was forgetting who built the system in the first place. They reached the end of the corridor, the kind that usually led to nothing more than fire exits and forgotten stairwells. But Ruth paused by a window overlooking the parking lot below, her truck parked alone among the staff sedans. The sun was higher now, beating down across the asphalt until it shimmered like glass. From up here, the VA facility looked peaceful again, normal even. But it wasn't. Something had changed. Colonel McBride stood beside her, arms folded loosely, but her eyes sharp as ever. "Those boys back there," she said, voice lower now, almost thoughtful. "They're not bad soldiers, just young. They don't know yet that respect isn't something you withhold until someone earns it. It's something you give until someone proves they don't deserve it." "They'll learn," Ruth replied, "or they'll leave." McBride exhaled a short, dry breath that could have been a laugh or just weariness. "Have you thought about coming back?" she asked. "Teaching, mentoring. There are programs now places where experience still matters." Ruth didn't answer immediately. She watched a squirrel dart across the sidewalk below, a janitor chasing it half-heartedly with a broom. Finally, she said, "I think about a lot of things. Most of them I decide against." McBride smiled faintly. "Fair enough." They continued walking toward the side exit. No parade, no salute, no announcement. Just 2 professionals who understood each other without needing to fill the space with words. As McBride opened the door, she glanced at Ruth one last time. "If you ever need anything." "I know where to find you," Ruth said. Then she stepped into the sunlight. The heat hit harder now, a dry, late morning kind of heat that clung to the skin and turned sidewalks into mirrors. Ruth didn't flinch. She walked across the lot without rushing. Her boots struck pavement in that same quiet, rhythmic cadence of someone who had never needed permission to move forward. Her truck started on the first try, the engine settling into a deep, familiar hum. She adjusted her rearview mirror, more out of habit than necessity. And there, just past the administration wing, she saw them. Brooks and Reed. No longer in uniform now, wearing bright blue maintenance coveralls, each holding a mop bucket. It wasn't punishment, so much as perspective. Reed looked up and caught her gaze through the windshield. His face, once cocky, was now smaller, humbled, not ashamed, just aware. He raised a hand knot, a wave, exactly, but a gesture of acknowledgement. Ruth, didn't stop, but she did nod. Once. Just enough. Then she was gone past the gates, onto the access road, and out toward the quiet stretch of highway where the world returned to forgetting what it didn't understand. Back inside, the building exhaled. Lights returned to normal. Consoles stopped blinking. The emblem disappeared from the terminal as quietly as it had arrived, leaving no trace but the memory it seared into every witness. On the third floor, McBride stood at her office window, watching Ruth's truck fade into traffic. A junior staffer appeared at her side, tablet in hand. "Colonel," he asked hesitantly, "what should I enter into the official record?" McBride didn't look away from the window. "Put down, we had a minor system verification. Situation resolved without incident. All personnel briefed." "And the woman? The one with the Alpha clearance?" She turned slowly, fixing him with a kind of stare that paused careers. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Alpha clearances don't exist." And that was that. Somewhere down the road, Ruth rolled her window halfway down. The radio was playing something soft, an old Bonnie Raitt tune she hadn't heard in years. She tapped the steering wheel lightly in rhythm, not because the music stirred anything particular, but because peace is what you carry when the world no longer gets to define you. She didn't need a title, didn't need to be thanked. She had her dignity, and she still had her voice. Whether she used it or not was entirely up to her. Respect doesn't come from rank. It comes from remembering that the quietest ones in the room may carry the heaviest truths. Ruth Barrett didn't need recognition only to remind the world that some credentials don't expire, because some missions never end. Have you ever met someone who was underestimated until one moment changed everything? What would you have done if you were that guard?